For people who have trauma, a lot of the times they're not getting to heal. We're supposed to feel our feelings. All of our feelings have a use. Our feelings help us to navigate our way through life. So if you're not comfortable with your feelings, you're going to have a really hard time navigating your way through life. It's heartbreaking to me that we have generations and generations of trauma. We weren't very nice to each other as we've evolved. So there's so much trauma that's happening. So for me, what drives me in the passion is just helping people to heal. It's knowing that when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. I feel like the journey I had gave me the empathy and it gave me the understanding. And that's what helps me to connect with my clients, is because I do understand what they're going through when they talk to me and they tell me about what they're feeling. And that drive is just to help people to be free so that we can have a better world, so that we can live in peace, so that there's less violence. And that's the drive. We're supposed to feel our feelings. All of our feelings have a use. Our feelings help us to navigate our way through life. So if you're not comfortable with your feelings, you're going to have a really hard time navigating your way through life, right? Whoever created us, whatever you believe, they did it perfectly. We are so beautifully created. They made the feelings that don't belong inside of us feel really uncomfortable, right? So that's how we know they don't belong inside of us. When we're feeling that pain, that hurt, that anger, we're meant to feel it to learn. But then once you learn, you let it go. And it's a lot of it is the learning that helps you to let it go. You want to feel what you feel so that you can move on.
Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to this week Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. Wow, this has been a guest I've been trying to tee up a time to meet with her for a couple of months now. And just to remind you, what is the context of this? She's a trained hypnotherapist clinician and have been operating for many years. As turning my own life around, I was growing up not a happy child and depressed and upset and even suicidal as well. But at around the age of 14, one of the things that I saw like in the infomercial late at night is it talks about the power of your subconscious mind. And in fact, maybe even different commercials and TV ads, they're already using subliminal message to program you. So I bought this thing off the infomercial, and this back then is still using tapes. And so one side of it is got positive affirmation as well as the sea breeze and the seagulls like singing in the background. The other side is just like the ocean waves and really like tranquil type of music. And it says how all you have to listen to it. On one side, if you want to say the affirmation after, say it. But if you don't feel like it, you just listen to the music. And it'll reprogram yourself, whether it's to be happier, successful, smart, good looking, whatever you want. You can reprogram yourself. And I thought, that's the lazy man's way of succeeding. I love that. And attribute a large part of my success in business and in life after that, and turning from a depressed child to someone that feels empowered, is from listening to that tape. And so that was my first interaction with self-hypnosis. And I'm forever grateful for it. Subsequently, I have other experiences, and each one of them I think is hugely revealing and transformative. Like one of the studies that I first came across, it says that the power of your subconscious mind is like 30 to 17,000 times more powerful than your conscious mind. So what we're thinking about, what our ego is thinking about what we should say, what we should do, how we should run the business, how we should build our relationship. If that's going well, or if it's doing okay, imagine having another 30 to 70,000% of you. So that's the way I looked at it. And so I'm excited to have our guest today. Her name is Suzanne Robichaud. She's a registered clinical hypnotherapist in Vancouver, Canada. When I came across her, what I've loved about her is she's got millions of views on her YouTube channel through a host of her videos. A lot of it is about letting go. If you've seen a lot of my videos, you would know that part of the awakening journey is about surrendering, is about letting go. And she's having all these videos and teaching us how to let go of different things that we've been holding on to. And so today, one of the topics we're going to talk about is how to release trauma, how trauma is trapped inside us, whether it's from our childhood or from somewhere in the past. And who better to have like Suzanne share her story and her insights. Thank you for coming on, Suzanne.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. And I like your story of when you were a teenager. That's awesome that helped you.
For the listener that don't know about your story, will you mind sharing about like what was your awakening journey like, and how did like hypnotherapists and hypnotherapy come into play?
Sure. Hypnotherapy came into play at an early age, but I didn't actually even realize that it had played a role until years later. The first time that I ever had a hypnotherapy experience was with a yoga instructor in a basement in her home. And it was just a very casual class. And we did some yoga, we did yoga training, and she had us lay down on the floor. And she took us through a meditation, which at the time I had done no meditating. I didn't even know anything about hypnotherapy or hypnosis or anything. And looking back at it now, it was very much a hypnotherapy session. It was definitely a hypnotherapy session with the full body regression and letting go and everything. And she had guided us to meet our higher power. And I had entered it with such an open mind, not having a clue of what we were doing. I was just so open that I had such an amazing experience that day. I was raised Catholic. I wasn't really Catholic at the time. I was in my early 20s and I wasn't practicing any religion, but I was raised Catholic. So when she said to meet your higher power, even though she had said, she left it completely open to everybody as to what that was, I, of course, ran to Jesus. And I was running down the clouds and she was saying to run, but I could feel it. And I'd never had this sort of experience before. So I was just so into it. Like it was really real and happening. I could hear her voice guiding me. I forgot about the rest of the people in the room, forgot that I was even in the room. I was running through the clouds towards my higher power. And I could feel the feeling of getting closer and closer. And I could feel it inside of me, the love. I didn't know it was love at the time. I just knew it was a good feeling. And then when I got there, she was still guiding us. I don't remember her exact words or anything, but I remember that in my mind, I was with Jesus and I was standing on a cloud and I didn't see him. He was standing behind me. And I remember looking down at the earth and it was in complete chaos. It was just in complete chaos and disaster. And I had this really strong, it was like interesting because I had conflicting feelings. I was just filled with so much love that I was crying. I didn't stop crying. Like when I came out of this, my jaw and my face was sore because I was smiling so big and I was soaking wet. But in that moment, I had this strong, powerful feeling of love and I could feel that presence right there. But then I was looking down at the earth and I kept feeling this strong feeling of you have to go back. And I was thinking, I don't want to go back. And I just wanted to stay in this feeling of love so much. And at that time, I got a very strong message that you have to go back, but you're going to be okay. And in that moment, like in hindsight, I see this now, but in that moment, I didn't. In that moment, it was like just a magical experience. And I couldn't believe how magical it was. And it was so cool. And I even remember getting in my car because a friend had done this class with me. And I even remember saying to her, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. And I think she fell asleep or something. Like she did not have the same experience. And I left that at that. Like at that time in my life, my confidence was so low. Wasn't touching spirituality in any way. I just thought it was just like a cool dream, a cool experience thing. But now all these years later, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was my first hypnotherapy experience that was calling me to this. And now I look back, like I'm 52, I think now. I'm in my early 50s. So this is a long time ago. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I ended up, helping people, reaching people in the world. It's like I was instructed I had to come back to do my part, my little part here. But from that, I also got to experience and have that moment of knowing that I was going to be okay. And I have returned to that moment so many times in my life. Any moment that I have a hard time or I'm doubting myself or I'm going through things that are difficult, I go back to that cloud.
Wow.
And I'm reminded that I'm going to be okay.
Wow.
So that was my very first experience with hypnotherapy. And that would actually be my first experience, I would think, as far as my spiritual awakening or taking my step into this direction. And then from there, I just started exploring with Wayne Dyer, like all of the Louise Hay people, Wayne Dyer, Marianne Williamson, everybody, Bruce Lipton, all of those wonderful people who I've learned from along the way. And within them is where I was hearing about hypnotherapy. I would hear within their work about hypnotherapy as being ways that you can change your mind. Because when I was young, up until I was in my early 30s, I was a very insecure, low confidence, really having a difficult time. I'm sure I was struggling with mental illness at the time. We just didn't talk about it really then. It wasn't something you spoke about. So I really had believed the way that I was just the way that I was. All of the difficulties I had, struggling with social anxiety, all kinds of confidence issues, self-worth issues, so bad. It was really, really low. I was a single mother, got pregnant at 19, just was living on my own at 15. Somewhere in there, I found Louise Hay. I found all of these people, and that started slowly guiding me through my 20s while trying to live my life, as a single mother with all the issues I had. These things slowly started to teach me that I could change. I didn't know that I could change. Even when I went to the doctor, they didn't say I could change. They wrote me a prescription. No one said, try these things, and I just think we weren't talking about these things at that time as much, right? So when I got into my early 30s, that is when I really started exploring. I actually had a psychic tell me that I should get into the field of helping people. And they instructed me first to do reflexology. So I did do that actually for, I think, 10 years or more. I did that for a long time. But then I moved into hypnotherapy. But as my spiritual awakening was working with Wayne Dyer and working with these people and learning from their books and their teachings, but then I did try hypnotherapy. And hypnotherapy, I saw a couple of hypnotherapists. And hypnotherapy was the one thing that really empowered me, to teach me, to help me to understand how the mind works. It gave me my power back, because it showed me that I can change and that my mind is mine and that no one controls my mind except for me. And that for some of us, when we have difficulties in our childhood, when you go through trauma, when you have difficulties, when you're a child, your conscious mind isn't developed enough yet to teach you the difference as to what it is that you're holding on to. No one's teaching you how to resolve the pain that you're feeling, the emotions you're experiencing. So consciously, you're not developed enough. And your brain develops with all of this trauma. And your brain develops like you're subconsciously, just as much as you're learning how to write and how to tie your shoe, you're also learning, if you're experiencing trauma, to look for what's going wrong, to look at how somebody can harm you. Like your brain develops differently. But nobody was teaching me that. And I learned that through hypnotherapy. I learned that to understand that about the mind. And I learned, most importantly, that I can change these things, that I can heal, that these behaviors that I was having, all of the difficulties I was having mentally and emotionally were not me, that person that I am was there inside. I just needed to heal. I needed to learn and I needed to understand. And I took those steps with these hypnotherapists, and with them, at first, I wouldn't even touch my childhood trauma. I was the type of person at that time in my life who believed, I've gotten through it this far. Why in the heck would I go back? Why would I go back? That doesn't make any sense. And my brain hadn't clued in yet that I wasn't better. You know what I mean? I was just better than I was. And because I was better than I was, that felt so great, because I was able, through the work that I did, to override some things, to let some things go on kind of a not so deep level. We hadn't touched the trauma. I was able to, to kind of build my confidence a bit and kind of work on myself. But it wasn't until I did my training as a hypnotherapist, and I got, one of the most wonderful things about when you're training for things is you have colleagues, you have the students that you train with, that you get to practice on and you get to get close to and share with, right? So I was very fortunate enough to have an incredibly beautiful woman. Sorry, that brings up feelings right there, because I'm just realizing in this moment how much this impacted my life was her encouraging me to do this. I'm actually realizing that in this moment. I'll have to give her a call after this. But she really showed me, because I was still having struggles, like with my confidence, even to be a hypnotherapist, and in life, in all areas, with friendships and my marriage, as a mother. And she really encouraged me to do the work with my trauma, and to do the inner child work, and to do that healing that I got taught to do in school. But I still, within the first year of my practice, didn't do it with a single person because I wasn't doing it for myself. So I'm not that type of person. If I'm not doing something myself, then I'm not going to do it with somebody else. So I was doing more like other stuff, just basic confidence stuff and things like fear of flying, things like that, quitting smoking, stuff like that. So when I did this work around the releasing trauma with her, that was when actual, real, powerful change started to happen. That was when I noticed that I was getting triggered. Like I didn't even know I was getting triggered. I thought it was just my behavior. Like I didn't know that something outside of me was triggering that emotional pain that I hadn't resolved yet, right? I didn't know that being triggered was a gift. It was an opportunity for you to know that there was something that you could heal to allow the best parts of you to come forward, to be your true self. I didn't understand any of that. So that helped me when I started doing the inner child work and I started healing. That helped me to understand, as I healed, I didn't have to be triggered anymore. And that was amazing because I was someone who seriously was triggered if a stranger looked at me the wrong way. I would be triggered if I went into, say, a clothing store and I was looking around and the people working there wouldn't acknowledge me. I'd be fine. But if they acknowledged the person coming in after me, my brain would catch that so fast. And my self-worth was so low that I was the kind of person that I would take that personal and it would trigger. So I would then leave that store and it would just bring up everything. And I'd spend the rest of the day being upset about this instance that no one else knew about. That was all just happening in my mind because I was triggered, right? So when I did the healing, the inner child work, that really helped me let go of those triggers and to be able to pause for a few moments between noticing that something's coming up, to have that moment of silence that didn't exist before I learned all of this. That moment, that space between a thought and a reaction, I all of a sudden had that. And in that space, your reflection and being able to see yourself, there's so much you can see in those few seconds. And that allows you to shift and to change. So when I did all of the healing and the trauma work, that is when I was able to really see the difference. And that's what makes me feel so passionate about the hypnotherapy. And that, I think, is really where it made the biggest difference in my spiritual awakening, which I'm still on. And I'm still growing, obviously.
Yeah, I highly resonate with that. I think for me, 26 years of my life, I've been hugely focused on personal development, especially the latter years and following around like Tony Robbins and his intimate platinum group around the world, as well as like going through whoever Tony learns it from. I'll go further, go and read those books or learn from those teachers and attend those seminars as well. But what I started to notice is that like what you just talked about, being triggered, it doesn't matter how much conscious intellectual knowledge that I know. If my wife said something, my kids do something, or someone gave me a certain look, and I'm already triggered and I'm already automatically giving a reaction without bypassing my conscious mind, because it's like the reptilian brain, like fight or flight, and I'm instant reaction, then the damage is already done. If you start to raise your voice at someone, if you give someone a certain look or you give someone a certain finger, you've already started the damage and then you have to go and repair it. But what you just talked about is going in deeper than that. Either that you don't get triggered by the same thing that happened, or you have those a few second gaps of awareness that you actually can pick it up and do have a choice before your conscious mind to say, should I take path A or path B? Should I give reaction A or reaction B? So that's amazing. Can you share with us like the mechanics doing a hypnotherapy? Why is it so effective? I guess addressing a lot of the root causes. Because again, like if we keep learning like from a lot, and again, like a lot of those books and teachers like served me and I'll be forever grateful for it. But if we don't clean up the root causes of what's underneath the conscious stuff that we're aware of, then those stuff is keep going to come up. And no matter how good we become at putting out fires, we're just going to become firemen.
Yeah. And it's like a horrible roller coaster ride is what it is. Like, that's what I found was like, even when I started the hypnotherapy work, when we were doing the work, and because the hypnotherapist wanted me to do the deeper work, I was the one who was like, no, I don't need to do it. So what would happen there was she was able to get me to a certain place, But then as soon as I was triggered, so I'd be up here, she'd get me up here where I'm feeling pretty good. But then as soon as I got triggered, I just went right down. And then I'd have to work my way back up the mountain again to that place of being good. But then I'd get triggered and then I would just go right back down. So the goal of hypnotherapy, to keep it simple, is to get the two parts of our mind believing the same thing. So that's the goal of hypnotherapy, to get the conscious mind and the subconscious mind believing the same thing.
By the
When they're
way,
believing,
before we continue,
yeah.
can we get a definition of what you mean by subconscious? Because for me, like my initial understanding is subconscious and then superconscious. But then with Dolores Cannon, like I studied a lot of her work, she said, well, her subconscious is actually the way she defines it, incorporates the higher self from source or divine or God or whatever. So what's your definition when you talk about the subconscious?
Okay. So I do see it a little bit differently, because for me, I see it as we're mind, body, and soul. So I'll see the soul as my spiritual self. My soul is that part of me that connects to my higher power. I see my body, and then I have my mind, right? My mind, which is my brain in action, right? So for me and how I'm trained and how I work is that there's two parts to your mind, the conscious and the subconscious. Right now, you and I are using our conscious mind. The conscious part of our mind is the part of us that knows the difference between what's wrong and what's right, what's real and imagined, what we want in the future, what we want for ourselves, what we don't want. The subconscious part of our mind is like a big computer. It's like a big computer that holds on to everything that we've ever learned and everything that we've ever experienced, everything we've smelt, everything we've felt, like everything, all of our experiences, all of the feelings that we had when we had those experiences. And the subconscious mind, it learns two different ways: through an emotional experience and through repetition. So we all know, like we learned in school about doing, the alphabet, tying our shoes, driving. We all learned by doing things over and over again. We did it so many times. And that once we did it so many times, the subconscious mind goes, oh, okay, he's doing this so many times. Let's make this automatic. And it becomes automatic. You don't have to think about how to tie your shoes. You don't have to think about how to put the food into your mouth. You learned that through repetition. But the other way that we have something that's held in the subconscious mind is through an emotional experience. If the experience is emotional enough that your mind believes it needs to hold on to it. So if somebody's, going to school and they get bullied, they go to school, they're filled with confidence. They believe that the world is all theirs. Everybody loves them. They're absolutely amazing because everybody at home keeps telling them how amazing they are. But then they go to school and somebody bullies them. That feeling that they're going to have is going to be so strong, and it's going to hurt them and make them feel so uncomfortable that the subconscious mind will hold on to that feeling. So that now it's to kind of keep you safe, right? It holds on to that feeling because it made you feel so unwell that it holds on to it so that whenever you're in a similar situation, it sets off this feeling, these emotions that it's holding on to, so that you don't put yourself in that situation again. And we know that worked great when we were running into bears in the forest, or, back in the day when we were cavemen and those sorts of things, when the stress and the trauma were those sorts of things. But as human beings, we've evolved and things have changed. And I mean, who knows, maybe there was bullying back in the caveman days. I don't know. But now we have all of these different situations and things that happen that cause us to feel all of these emotions, right? That aren't necessarily physical, but the subconscious mind still holds on to those emotions, whether it's physical or it's emotional, right? So this is how we're working with hypnotherapy, and this is how we're working with the mind. And this is through my training. I have a very open mind about this. I actually wrote something the other day that I read the other day, that they said there was no subconscious mind. So that kind of, right, for everything that I do, I was like, whoa, there's a concept. So, right. So this is how we work with hypnotherapy, and this is how we look at it with hypnotherapy. And when it comes to the triggers and trauma, how I see it and what I believe it is, and how I'm trained, is that trigger is because your subconscious mind is still holding on to that emotion. So like for me, when I was being ignored in that clothing store, I had such low self-worth at that time that I could that easily, it was almost like that feeling of feeling unworthy, right, would be triggered inside of me, and it would set off this whole huge thing, even though nothing really, like there was nothing happening there, right? But what happened was, as I did the hypnotherapy and I did the healing, because we can heal through hypnotherapy, the subconscious mind responds to what we imagine. The subconscious part of our mind does not know the difference between what's real and imagined. That's the job of the conscious mind. So when we enter into a state of hypnosis, when we allow ourselves to enter into the state, which is a completely natural state, we've all been in states of hypnosis throughout our lives. When we allow ourselves to enter into that state, it's just like when you're watching a really good movie and you let your conscious mind just kind of sit over here and you get so into it that you've forgotten about the whole outside world. You have no perception of time and you're having an emotional response to something that you consciously know isn't real. Right? You know it's a movie, but you've allowed yourself to get into it, that you're believing it at that level, that you're emotionally responding to it. So you're in a state of hypnosis then, but that's called a waking state. It's just a light state of hypnosis. When we do hypnotherapy, we like to take you a bit deeper to a state called somnambulism, which there's no need to remember that at all. It's just a deeper state where you're just a little bit deeper and we kind of have deeper access to your subconscious mind. And when we're working directly with the subconscious mind, we can use metaphors, guided imageries. I can take you on a journey to help you heal, to help you let go. Inner child work is amazing. What I'll often do with my hypnotherapy clients is get them to bring up the feeling of the trigger. So whatever that feeling is that's coming up for them, quite often people will, you have grown adults. When they're triggered, it brings them right back to feeling like a small child. It was like that for me, where I didn't realize it at first, but then as I was doing the work, it was just like, whoa, I'm that little girl. When this person talks to me that way, I turn into that little girl, even though I'm a strong, grown woman. So it reverts us right back to that feeling that when we get triggered, it brings us back to that feeling. It brings that feeling up. But when we do hypnotherapy, we can get into a state where we can access that part of our mind where that's being held. And we could use imagery, a journey. I can guide you to release that emotion. And your subconscious mind will believe that you're doing it like it was an actual real experience. So it's not just about going back. It's most importantly about letting it go. Like that's the most important part. And I've done this in my life, and I have done this with so many people. And that's what makes it such a big difference, because when that emotion isn't driving the behavior is easier to change, because then it's just thoughts, and thoughts without the emotion are so much easier to change.
So what you were saying before, in the caveman age, where you've got like bears and tigers chasing you,
Yeah.
it is useful to keep that emotion of whenever you see a bear to run away from it. But nowadays, like if someone look a certain type or have a certain name, or maybe have a certain race, or from a certain company stole money from you, by you thinking that someone starting with a certain name, certain look, certain company, maybe certain gender is going to steal money from you, like that's not necessarily the case. And overall, our stimuli is because we don't have to worry about like food and shelter and stuff. Everyone giving us a certain look, talk to us in a certain negative tone, we're suddenly recognizing it as threats, and we've built up all this emotional baggage. And over time, it just become a heavy and heavier burden to carry with us. So it's so cool that you're able to help people release them. What would be a typical person's experience? Or would they just through one session and they kind of like the whole issue is gone, or would they need to come back a few times? And when people go through the hypnotherapy session, do people tend to recall that, or were they conscious at the time, or some are conscious or some are not?
It really depends. Everybody has their own natural ability to go into hypnosis. But as far as with the hypnotherapy sessions, like for my clients, I find that it really depends. It really depends on what somebody has gone through. That's what my experience has been. That was my experience with myself. And I've been doing this for 13 years. That's my experience as well with my clients. Also, as well, their age. Like if I work with somebody young, that's why when I heard you say that you were 14, you said that you had some difficulties even feeling suicidal as a young boy, but you said that doing these sessions at 14, it's amazing that it did help to make that change. But I believe the reason it helped to make that change without you having to do work on the trauma is because you were young and your brain is still developing, still in our teens, our brain is still developing at that time. So, and I've noticed that within my practice, that when somebody comes younger, it is a lot easier to change things. We can get through things a lot quicker, even when it is trauma. But I've found that As far as the clients, it's really depending on what people are coming to me with. Like if somebody's had a lot of trauma and I'm the first person that they're working on that trauma with, then it does take multiple sessions and it takes a little while. Some people are even just like how I was, resistant to doing the deeper work, because when you're feeling like you're just filled so full of pain, telling somebody that we're going to go within to look at that pain is really hard. So it takes a little bit of time to get to that place. You have to get them to a place where they can trust that it's okay to go within, that they can trust themselves when they go within, right? So it all depends on where people are coming. Like I have a handful of counselors and therapists that will send their people to me just to do that. And that's all the people come to me to do that. And then they go back to their counselor and therapist. You know what I mean? So it really depends on the person, on their journey. It depends on what other work have you done prior to seeing me? What other work have you done on your healing journey? So I don't feel like there is just the one answer. I can say to you that, lots of studies have been done and that sort of thing. And the average is, 4 to 6 sessions. That's the average. And I would say within my practice, that is too, but I do tend to draw clients who have had a lot of trauma. So I do tend to work with people who've been through a lot, where we are working together a little bit longer.
I can see that you're very passionate about this. What brings you so much joy and enjoyment in helping people through this process? Like, tell me, like, what is it, the transformation you see in people? Like, what is the buzz that you get out of it? Because I'm just seeing that you've got feel that like it's such a buzz, it's such a drive for you to wanting to help people.
It's honestly, it's knowing how I used to be and knowing how I am now.
Mm.
And that was the biggest thing for me when I started this journey, when I did the hypnotherapy, and it started helping me even before I did the trauma work. Like even that stuff, it already changed so much. And for me now, after doing it for so long, now that I've got my YouTube channel and I've been able to reach people all around the world, now that I get to talk to people all around the world, and we all have the same thing. We all have these same issues. And it's heartbreaking to me that we have generations and generations of trauma. We weren't very nice to each other, as we've evolved. So there's so much trauma that's happening, so for me, what drives me in the passion is just helping people to heal. It's knowing that when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. And I do believe in that message that I got, as silly as it may sound to some, as silly as it sounds coming out of my mouth. I do believe in that message that is what I'm here for. That is what I'm here for, that's what I'm here for, is to help people to heal. I feel like the journey I had gave me the empathy and it gave me the understanding. And that's what helps me to connect with my clients, is because I do understand what they're going through when they talk to me and they tell me about what they're feeling. And that drive is just to help people to be free so that we can have a better world, so that we can live in peace, so that there's less violence,
Yeah.
And that's the drive.
Yeah. I hear about the story that similar stories that you went through in your first hypnotherapy session in with the yoga teacher, where you feel like the oneness of all, you feel so much love from connecting with God or the creator that
Mhm.
it's almost like you don't want to go back. And people have near-death experiences, have similar experiences as well. But very consistently, the message is that our goal is not to live in heaven, like at least not for this lifetime, but is to bring heaven to earth. And
Yeah.
I really acknowledge you for bringing down, I guess, dedicated your life to serving humanity and helping us connect to what heaven feels like, that abundance of love.
Yeah. It's interesting too, like even that whole thing of love, right? I remember when I learned to go about going from fear to love. And it sounded so weird to me. It was just I'm like, what do you mean? And that's when I learned, like with Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer. Marianne Williamson was huge for teaching me this about, you're either coming from a place of fear or love. I learned about this from a musician, Jason Mraz. I just remember I was so into his music, and he got the tattoo, Be Love. And I didn't even understand what be love meant, but I wanted to know, what do you mean be love? How can we be love? Love is something you get from other people. Love is something you need to get from over there. It was such a hard concept for me to understand, because I just didn't understand that I was love, that I'm energy and I have a choice. And I remember, and I did the same thing. Like it meant so much to me that I got the tattoo, be love. So I could remind myself all the time, every day when I look at my arm, to remember to go back to being love, because I had such a victim mentality. I came from such a fear. It took, like, I had to reprogram my whole brain. Like I had so much work to do, but I've come so far and I'm very proud of it. And with that, that's how I can honestly look at my clients and tell them, yes, you can change, because I didn't just learn it from a book. Somebody didn't just teach it to me. I did do it. Right. But I learned about this being love. And even just hearing you say that about how we get to experience those in those moments, that feeling of just being love, that oneness, that connectedness. And it reminds me, like, of when I got my tattoo, of how far we are from that, because people were so confused by my tattoo. Like, people would tell me that it was written wrong, that it should say something else. I am loved, all of these things. Like, I got so many, and it made me realize, like, I was like, this is crazy. We live in a world where we can say, I am angry, I am mad, I am frustrated, I'm all these things. But to say I am love confuses people. So it just really showed me how far and how disconnected as I was. Like, when I first heard the concept too, that I could be love, it's like, what? And now, through my experiences and through everything we've learned, like, that's the number one thing every day, that, when I meditate, it's just bring me back to love. I am love. I just sit in the energy of love. And as I go throughout my day, and as, life is life and is filled with stress and ups and downs, the one thing I just always remember is to bring myself back to love, just always to bring myself back to love. And that's kind of what helps as well. And that's easier to do when you're not getting triggered and you don't have trauma and all of that pain and hurt inside of you. It's really hard to do if you still haven't resolved your pain, because then you're on that roller coaster and you're just spending so much time having to, to heal yourself and get back to that good place.
Before someone decides to do a hypnotherapy session to release some of the traumas, let's just say if they encounter certain situations that they feel like they are a victim of the circumstance, and logically, let's just say someone got punched in the face or someone got money stolen from them, how could they not be a victim? Like, my stuff was stolen, I was the innocent person walking around and someone just punched me. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say to that person that they should feel the feelings from that experience. Like, that's the number one thing, right? We are victims. And that's, like, sometimes for people, you are a victim. Like, so people who go through childhood trauma, they are a victim. But what happens is their brain is developing, and unfortunately develops with that really victim mentality. That's how I was. I was like an amazing victim. Like, I told everyone my story, you know what I mean? Like, I had such a victim mentality, but it took me to get to that place of realizing that being a victim wasn't a good place to be. So then I moved into survivor, but then I didn't even want to be a survivor. I just wanted to be Suzanne. Like, I didn't want any of that. So I would say that there is a time to be a victim. It's not about not experiencing your experience. It's actually so incredibly important that you feel all of your feelings when you're going through it. So if somebody robbed you, you should be angry, because that's something that would make you angry. Like, and that's part of the problem I feel like we have, is that we don't feel our feelings. We don't feel our feelings. No one's ever come to me for hypnotherapy because they had an emotional experience and the feelings were resolved and they understood their feelings. Never, ever. Like, right? It's because especially for people who have trauma, a lot of the times they're not getting to heal, especially children, or, it's not just children. I go back to that because I just work so much in that area, people who come from that. But you're not allowed to feel your feelings, right? We all are supposed to be really happy right now. We're supposed to all just be really positive so that you can be in a high vibe. Like, that's, but we're supposed to feel our feelings. All of our feelings have a use. They have, like, our feelings help us to navigate our way through life. So if you're not comfortable with your feelings, you're going to have a really hard time navigating your way through life, right? Whoever created us, whatever you believe, they did it perfectly. We are so beautifully created. They made the feelings that don't belong inside of us feel really uncomfortable, right? So that's how we know they don't belong inside of us. When we're feeling that pain, that hurt, that anger, we're meant to feel it, I believe, to learn. But then once you learn, you let it go. And it's a lot of it is the learning that helps you to let it go. You are a victim for a short period, but you don't want to stay there. You don't want that to now be that's what you are now for the rest of your life. But that's what happens when we don't resolve the emotion and we don't deal with our feelings. Our feelings are incredible, all of them. We're meant to feel them. We were made beautifully, and I think a really big part of why there's so much issues with mental health out in our world right now is because we're not comfortable feeling our feelings. People are suppressing their feelings. People believe they have to be happy and positive all the time. And that's just not true. You want to feel what you feel so that you can move on.
I do agree with you. I think like across many various ancient and spiritual practice, it talks about like fully feeling your emotions. I mean, I think in Buddhism that if you don't feel through it, it becomes trapped emotion, and that's called samskara. And then that eventually you find a place to come out. In shamanic traditions, I think they talk about that as well. Let's delve a little bit deeper into like how do we feel through the emotions? Because let's just say if someone is angry, or if I see my kids right now, sometimes they have a little tiff, and then they just yell and scream and maybe scratch and maybe punch and maybe throw things around. Should we allow that to happen, or should we encourage them to use breath or go within, or should we just let them be? Like, what's your recommendation? Oh, that's from a little child standpoint. Obviously, an adult will have the equivalent behavior in the adult version of it.
Well, the best place to start would actually be with our children. That would be the best place to start, right? So that we don't have to try to learn how to do that as an adult. And I think we're starting to see that change in our world. But that's, I think, the biggest thing, because that's what I see. I see generations before you and I, where we have generations of our parents who didn't feel their feelings, who weren't allowed to feel their feelings. They had other stuff going on, right? So I don't know what your upbringing was like, but I know with my upbringing, feelings were not a thing. Like, you got over it. Somebody bullied you, you just went back outside and you played with them. Like, you got over, like it was, there was a fake sorry or whatever, but your feelings were never really addressed. So I think with that being said, I just want to say that I think the most important thing that we could do for the world right now is teach children how to feel and to express their emotions so that they can feel comfortable with all of their feelings. Now, when dealing with the kids, of course, it would depend on the situation. If a kid's, needs to be, held or hugged first, whatever the situation is, you have to deal with whatever it is with the child. But when the time is right, when you have them at a place where they can have a conversation with you and understand you, I would say that it's so important to just ask them how they're feeling and help them as an adult to guide them through their feelings, to let them know that it's okay to have that feeling, to help them understand the feeling so that it's resolved. Because when the feeling is resolved, it's like we don't hold, it's not still inside. I think of it kind of like, how we are with physical pain. We experience physical pain. Say I'm a kid and I put my hand on the burner on the stove and it hurts really bad. And I learned to never touch that burner again. And I have all of that pain. That pain lets us know that there's something physically wrong with the body. But I learned from it, right? I learned like, oh my gosh, I don't touch the stove. And then it healed, the physical wound healed. But every time I walk into the kitchen and look at the stove, I don't have an emotional reaction because I learned and I let it go. So the emotion was resolved, right? But what's happening to us emotionally is we're not resolving our emotions, right? And they're just staying inside. So as an adult, when those things come up, the number one thing you want to do is you want to ask yourself, what am I feeling? What am I feeling in this moment? Am I feeling unheard? Am I feeling like I don't matter? What is it that I'm feeling? And then that's where you want to kind of ask yourself, okay, maybe you can look back at your life and you can say, oh, where did that come from? Most people know, they can see it. And then you can say to yourself, is it true now? Was it even ever true? Do I want to hold on to this? Like, your mind responds to what you tell it. So you can talk your way through these things. There are ways to deal with it. But at the same time, that sounds way too oversimplified to somebody who's having a hard time. So that's easier to do depending on where you are on your journey, right? That's not something I would say to somebody who's having a really hard time. So there's it's all depending on where you're at emotionally, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
With that sort of thing. Because I remember when I was having a really hard time and people saying really simple things to me and it didn't work.
Yeah. That makes sense. With what's happening around the world, especially with the pandemic, and there's a lot of macro events that's happening, and subsequently it seems like whether you're under lockdown or whether you've got more restrictions or you feel like some of your rights are taken away, it causes more like micro type of triggers as well. Over the last couple of years, have you seen different issues in terms of people coming to visit your clinic, or is it still the same issue?
What I'm noticing the most, well, what I've noticed, which has really been interesting, actually, what I really noticed, especially the first year of COVID, almost every single person who contacted me was an empath. And I'd never noticed that before. That was really wild for me. That's kind of where it worn off. But it was like, I was like, for the first year, it was just wild to me. And at the time, I am very empathic. And at the time of COVID is when I was learning how and training myself to embrace being an empath instead of it feeling that like this crutch or, this other thing that it felt like for so long. But I was, that part of my journey. So it was really interesting to me. But I would say now what I've noticed through COVID is that it's given people time to reflect and the time to do this work. And I haven't had things come up around all of the different beliefs, I guess, because we don't really get into that. I'm always dealing with the feelings that people are having. So it's never really bringing up what's happening outside in the world so much, like, because we're always talking about what's happening within, and it's always something that was already there. But what I've found through COVID is it seems to have given people time to reflect, time to slow down and to look more into the healing, and stuff's coming up, maybe even because they've slowed down, they've had to slow down. And when you slow down, that's when whatever's inside of you does come up. That's why there's so much addiction and everything, right? People have to find a way to do something to.
And personally, like, what do you believe is happening around the world now from more like a spiritual, like a higher perspective standpoint?
What do I believe? You know what? I don't know, because what I have learned through COVID, because when COVID very first started, I went down, like I had 2 months off. I went down every rabbit hole on the internet, every single one. And there's a lot. And the reason I got so into it is because I'm so fascinated by the mind, right? So I'm so fascinated with belief. So it just fascinated me to see. And I was so amazed because prior to COVID, I knew that we were separated by religion. I had no idea we were separated by so many other things, and that people could believe so many different things. And I now really do have that understanding of we create our own reality in a way that I've never had it before. I now get that. And I remember even watching some of the stuff, and I would have to make myself stop because luckily I'm very aware of myself and my mind, that I would catch myself starting to believe some stuff, but I knew enough to know that it was only just the repetition of it. Like, do you know what like, right? And I knew enough to know that. I knew enough to, I was like, no, stop. This is just becoming familiar. You know what I mean? You're seeing things that aren't really. So I knew to step away from things. But I now, more than anything, the power of belief is the most powerful thing, what we believe, and there's so many different beliefs out there. And I don't really know what's going on. I am so open. I've been enjoying your podcast and hearing like the different stories and different things from your podcast and other podcasts out there. I'm very open to learning and understanding. I know for sure that there's obviously something else beyond us, where I've had voices, speak to me. I've heard a male voice, so I knew it wasn't my own in times in my life where I've had spiritual moments, where I've had things happen. So I know there's something else out there. I know we're spiritual beings. I know that we're energy. I know that when you stay in a place of love, I know that we're meant to feel good. When we stay in that place, we attract more of the same, so there's a lot of things that I believe in, but I am a student here with what's going on right now. And I'm constantly being guided to just go back to my work. Like, as much as all of this other stuff interests me so much as to what's out there, whether it is beings from other planets and all that kind of stuff, which I do believe in, I just don't know very much about it, whether it's our higher power, whatever it all is, I'm so open to it all. But I keep being guided back to my work here on Earth. Like, I keep getting messages to do my work. So, and I just have a very strong feeling like that's just what I'm supposed to be doing.
Do you also seek other hypnotherapists to help you through the journey, or you at a certain stage that you can do stuff for yourself? Or is it like a chiropractor, you still need someone to work on your back and stuff?
I definitely believe in continuing work. I do have a few people that I will see from time to time. I'm able to do a lot of self-hypnosis just because I can go into a state of hypnosis so easily. Everybody can. It's just a practice, right? I mean, you had even asked me at the beginning, I think at some point we were talking, maybe it was before we started the podcast, about the difference between hypnotherapy and meditation, right? Well, it's all a practice. Like, I feel that when you go into a state of hypnosis, you're going into the place that people are trying to get to when they meditate. It's just when you're in that place, we're going to do some work, and you might even go a bit deeper. I know that often with hypnotherapy, people find that their meditation practice is so much more enhanced after doing hypnotherapy, because hypnotherapy can get you to that deep state. And as you repeatedly do that, you're creating that pathway in your mind to that place. So I'll have a lot of people who come to me who say like, oh, I try to meditate, but I just can't do it. But then we do the hypnotherapy, and now we've created a pathway in their mind to that place. So now they just got to keep going back until so it starts becoming familiar and ingrained. And then it becomes easier to more quickly go to that place. So that's why I can do my own hypnotherapy and go into my inner child when something comes up, and if I need to do more work, or I can ask myself if something does happen, if I do get a trigger, because that's life, right? If something does happen, I can ask myself, what am I feeling? And I can go internally and I can do that work, or I can listen to something on YouTube as I do. There's other hypnotherapists on YouTube that I listen to their work if I want. I don't always want to hear my own voice, right? But I definitely believe in a daily practice of meditation, and whether I'm doing self-hypnosis or meditation. But for me, it's always just about returning to love.
So you've got millions of views on your YouTube channel. What's the best way for them? Because you always talked about depends on what stage you're at and maybe what traumas you have as well. Everyone is so unique. So someone just new to your channel, how should they approach? Is there a certain video they should start off with? Or is there a certain playlist?
Just the letting go, like everything I don't do on my YouTube channel that deep work, because for me, it's like, I feel like that requires the one-on-one. When I'm working with somebody doing inner child work and regression work and that kind of stuff, that I call it, just to simplify it, it's like clearing out your baggage, your emotional baggage, right? I feel like that requires the one-on-one, but again, it's different for everybody. Like I have one on my YouTube channel, letting go of the emotional pain, that so many people have just gotten such a benefit from. And again, it's depending on when did they listen to it? What have they already done, right? So as far as starting out, you can pretty much start with anything on my YouTube channel, because there's not like, I don't do that deep work there. So you're not going to be just opening up trauma, like, listening to it. But I would start with the ones for just training your mind to let go. And just, the simple, like I have ones to surrender, just to allow yourself to let go into that state. Like that for a lot of people is a huge thing, to just let go into that state. So I have really simple ones for letting go, or I surrender. I have a lot of like suggestive therapy that I actually give to my clients, because I started the YouTube channel for, actually, because back when I started, I was burning CDs and giving CDs to my clients for the repetition work, right? Because there is those two parts to it, right? There's the changing it in the mind, but then you need that repetition to get it ingrained. So I was burning CDs, and I just didn't want to burn CDs anymore or add more, crap to the world, garbage to the world. You know what I mean? So I was like, well, I just started a YouTube channel, and I really didn't know what would happen, but I just started making stuff for my clients, stuff that they could listen to repetitively in between coming to see me. But then that grew. So everything and anything, but people is okay to listen to. My YouTube listeners write me all the time to get guidance, to ask me questions, or just in the YouTube videos. I'm very happy. I've been working the last few years of my life. I'm trying to get to a place now where I can reach more people versus the one-on-one, because you can only see so many people in a day. And I still am doing a one-on-one practice, but I am at a place in life right now where I'm looking to, to branch out. So I'm, looking at maybe doing like group, online inner child and those sorts of things, so I can reach more people. Because the other thing about therapy and healing is it's very expensive. And a lot of people can't afford it. Like I couldn't afford it when I was a single mom trying to raise my two kids, but boy, did I need it, So a big important part of it for me too is to try to reach people. Like that's how the YouTube channel started progressing, as well as people did start listening and writing me back their feedback, was thinking like, I need to be able to reach people, and not everybody can afford it. Like it's ridiculously expensive, and it's just out of range for a lot of people. So with the YouTube channel, it helps. And then just trying to do more things. Like that's what I'm wanting to start doing now, reaching more people.
Yeah. And so if you want to come across the YouTube channel, can you tell them how to find it? And for people that also want to like consult with you one-on-one or maybe do the group work, where do they go?
Just to northvancouverhypnotherapy.com. And then hopefully we'll put some links underneath the videos when you put it up or in your podcast. But northvancouverhypnotherapy.com is my website. And that's just because when I started here many, many years ago, now it's such a long name, but I don't want to change it now. It's just funny. When I first started out, I didn't actually ever think I was going to reach so many people. And North Vancouver is just where I live. So it was the best name to have, domain name for the Google search.
Yeah.
So, but now it's, so now I have this huge northvancouverhypnotherapy.com as my website, but just through, Suzanne Robichaud on Instagram, and my YouTube channel, it's just Suzanne Robichaud. So it's all really easy, and hopefully we'll put the links below the video in your, so that people can find it. But I do offer a free consult, and I will be doing more. I'm just starting to I'm at a place in my life where I can start creating more of those things now and room for those things.
Yeah. So if you feel called, I definitely encourage you to check out some of the videos on YouTube. I definitely found it really interesting and it's really well executed as well. A lot of them is not too long, so you can definitely fit it in before you sleep, or maybe first the thing you listen to when you wake up. And if you feel called again, like the deeper work, like do contact Suzanne personally as well. So to finish up, I want to ask you about a snippet of a story you shared with me over the email about you doing a DNA test. I thought it is a quite interesting story to finish out.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. So I was adopted. And, like I said, I'm in my early 50s now, and I've never looked for my birth parents. I've never had any drive to, I've never wanted to. For me, it was kind of like, I'm my mother who adopted me. I'm very close to her. I love her very much. So I never felt the need to have to try to find a mother figure. And I've had lots of opportunities to do it, but I never have. And one day, just a little while, not that long ago, it was this year, just after I was doing a meditation, it was on YouTube. I was sitting down doing meditation here in my little space, and a song came on automatically after. And it was like this, like a Viking music or something. I don't know what it was, like some Viking music. And it was so strong. Like the feeling I got, I'm not kidding you. It went through every cell of my body. I started crying. Like I just was like, something happened to me in that moment when I heard that music. So that made me decide to do the DNA test. So I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to find out what this is. It was a strong enough feeling to make me drop a couple $100. Do you know what I mean? To get like this, to do this sort of thing. And I did it with just wanting to know my ancestry. Like that was what I wanted to know, because it just blew me away, that feeling that I had. And then I ended up finding my biological father, a sister, two brothers. And one of the first things they told me was that my grandfather was a hypnotherapist here in the city where I'm living now. And I'm not from here. I'm from the other side of Canada. So it was just wild to find out that my grandfather was a hypnotherapist.
Wow.
And then I ended up being a hypnotherapist without even knowing.
Despite some of the censorship and things going on with the social media platforms, one thing I do enjoy is every so often when I listen to the stuff, that whatever video or music track that comes next, sometimes it seems like too divine, that song, or it just pops on at the right time. It's almost like that's divine intervention to skewer that randomness in guiding us what we needed to hear or see or feel at that moment. So like I can relate to that. Suzanne, thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for all your sharing and your generosity, not just for today, but all the stuff that you put out to the community on your channels, and you're dedicated to serve humanity and helping them like release their trauma. And yeah, I really enjoyed today, and I love staying connected with you.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for letting me share my work and about my work. I appreciate it so much.